Commissioner, good afternoon. How are you?
Great to be here. Good afternoon.
So just give us the quick rundown as to who you are and what you do for those that don't know.
Sure. So I'm Sam Levine. I lead the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. And our job is to make sure New Yorkers don't get ripped off, whether it's gig workers who aren't earning their minimum pay, consumers being hit with junk fees, or being trapped in their gym memberships. Our job is to hold companies accountable, get many money back in consumers' pockets, and ultimately make New York a more affordable place to live.
Commissioner, start with explaining to me again, and I just want to walk people through certain things because the layperson may not understand. Describe a junk fee and give me a practical
Yeah.
example of what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, so junk fees are these hidden fees that you think you're going to pay one price, let's say for a hotel room or a concert ticket, and then when it comes time to turn over your credit card, you pay a different price. So something that's happened to me is I'm looking online for hotels. I see different rooms advertised. Let's say I find a great room that's $200 a night. Then I show up at the front desk after I've already, agreed to go to this hotel. I show up at the front desk and they say, "Oh, there's a $50 destination fee, or there's a $40 resort fee, and you have to, if you want to get in the room, you have to pay that fee." Those fees are now illegal in New York City, thanks to a rule that DCWP just passed. So this is the kind of bread and butter work we are doing to make the city more affordable for people. And by the way, that rule not only protects folks visiting New York, it also protects New Yorkers who are going to hotels in other cities. We want to make sure that the price that's advertised for hotel rooms is the price that people pay. That's just one example of a junk fee. But there are a lot in a whole bunch of different industries, and we're attacking them across the board.
Let's talk about just forcing people to subscribe to something, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. And what is it? Is it that just, for example, on the website or on the application, you can't find a way to do so? Is that, and I'm referring to Amazon. I understand there
Yeah.
was a sort of a situation where
Yeah.
what it's been prevalent where someone tries to get out from their
Mhm.
Prime subscription and they can't.
Yeah, it's a great example. So in my last job, when I was at the Federal Trade Commission working with Lena Khan, we actually sued Amazon over their subscription practices. We sued Amazon and three of their top executives. And we alleged two things primarily. First, that Amazon signed people up for subscriptions without their knowledge, just sign them up for monthly billing. And second, that when people tried to cancel the subscriptions, Amazon made it really hard. They made deliberate design choices to try to make it hard for people to cancel subscriptions. Earlier this year, the company agreed to pay $2.5 billion and to overhaul their subscription practices to make sure that didn't happen again. And that's the same kind of accountability I want to bring here to New York City. I know there are a lot of New Yorkers, for example, who might have joined a gym in January, following up on their New Year's resolution. But maybe in March and April, they realize they want to cancel. Maybe they move into a new building that has a gym. Maybe they want to enjoy our beautiful park system and work out there. We want to make sure that New Yorkers can cancel their gym memberships without having to send a certified letter or jumping through a lot of hoops. So these subscription traps happen in all sorts of industries. I have a track record of taking on some of the biggest companies in the world, including Amazon, to make sure they can't trap consumers. And that's the same energy that I want to bring and am bringing to DCWP.
For Eats and DoorDash, talk a little bit about the sort of tips on the front end, on the back end. I know that they weren't too pleased with some of the, or publicly at least,
Yeah.
with some of the sort of policy decisions you've rolled out. And I want you to talk about the balance, right? Because people always equate, in some cases, they try to pile them all together. There's such a term with between mom and pop shops and empty storefronts
Right.
and these, big corporate entities that, in some cases, right, try to pin themselves as these mom and pop. But how do you draw the balance between, right, accountability,
Mhm.
making sure that people are responsible corporations and or, corporate citizens, and right, that the average employee is not given the short end of the stick or the sort of notion that you're running business out of town with regulation and red tape and taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So talk a little bit about that, Commissioner.
Yeah, so it's a really important point and really important distinction to make. So let's start by talking about Uber Eats and DoorDash. So last year, when the city passed a minimum pay rate for deliveristas. What Uber Eats and DoorDash did, according to a report that this department issued last month, is made it harder for consumers to tip their delivery workers. They moved the tipping option to after checkout rather than prompting it before checkout. That might sound like just sort of a subtle design change, who cares? But it made a huge difference for deliveristas. It cut their tips by more than $500 million dollars, $550 million less in tips for delivery drivers. And what I find really interesting, and I think this speaks to your point, is that for the other app companies that did not change their,
Commissioner, just one point of clarity, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
yeah,
Is that in New York City? $500
that
million?
is just in New York City.
Wow.
That is
Sorry.
just in New York City. I'm glad you asked. For competitor apps, New Yorkers kept tipping. This was not an issue of New Yorkers not wanting to tip their delivery drivers. This really was an issue of these giant multi-billion-dollar corporations using design tricks to drive down worker pay. But the good news is the city council put an end to that practice. Last month, they celebrated the passage of new legislation that would prohibit those kind of tipping tricks to make sure that it's easy for consumers to tip the delivery drivers. To be clear, consumers have a choice. Tips are not mandatory, but certainly I'm a big believer that, especially with this weather we've been having, deliveristas are out there in our streets risking their lives to get food delivered so that other New Yorkers can, eat from the comfort at home. These delivery drivers are risking their lives to keep the city moving. I'm a big believer personally in tipping delivery drivers, but the big message from this legislation is that, yes, it's up to consumers. The app companies just have to get out of the way and make sure that consumers can tip if they want to. Now, you also asked about the difference between, big corporations and mom and pop companies. I think that's really important. The fact of the matter is, one of the things I've always tried to battle in my career is this approach by some regulators where small companies really get beaten up for small infractions, and then big companies get white glove kind of concierge treatment. They have fancy lawyers, they call City Hall, they get special favors, special exemption under the law. One of the things I think Mayor Mamdani has made clear, one of the things I have made clear, is that era is over in New York City. We really want to be champions for our small businesses here in New York. Just last week, I celebrated the passage of street vendor reform to help our smallest small businesses thrive in New York City, and also making sure that the largest corporations in the city pay their fair share, pay their workers fairly, and aren't ripping off consumers. So to me, it's really about ensuring that there's equal justice under the law for small companies and big companies, and that big companies aren't getting special treatments just because they can hire the most lobbyists.
Commissioner, let's start into how do you make sure that people are held accountable? And I only say that because the mayor went up for Tin Cup Day to Albany.
Yeah.
Right, there was a prelim budget, huge budget deficit. I'm familiar with DCWP and some of the work that it does, and there are people that have to go out from inspectors to staff that actually have to do the work, right, of making sure people are doing what they're supposed to do and following the law and the rules. How do you do that again? It's been known to happen in the past with OMB, saying, we have to cut or we can't, hiring freezes. How do you plan to implement some of these policies or make sure these folks that are not doing the right thing are held accountable, considering these massive budget caps?
Well, you're exactly right. The city is facing a major budget shortfall. The mayor just today, I don't know when folks are going to hear this, but the mayor just today released preliminary figures. But there's a big gap to fill. We know that. And DCWP has a big job to do. But my message, certainly for the workers of the city, for the consumers of the city, and perhaps most importantly for the big companies in the city, is that we are not going to rest in doing our job. With whatever resources we have, we're going to use it to the maximum to deliver for the people of this city. And I think we're already showing that. Just last week, we announced a lawsuit against a publicly traded company. This is not some, corner store, Extra Space, for really ripping off New Yorkers who were trying to find a place to store their stuff through huge price hikes, horrible conditions, sometimes even extorting New Yorkers, we allege in our complaint. So the allegations were really serious, and we took Extra Space to court. We also took MotoClick, a delivery app company, to court for ripping off their workers. And by the way, we named the CEO as well. We took Radiant Solar to court. It's the largest home improvement action we've ever brought. So these are three major lawsuits we brought just in the last month. And I think the signal we are trying to send is there is a new sheriff in town. We are not afraid to take companies to court, even if they're really big. Absolutely, we could do a lot more with more resources, but nobody should assume that they can get away with breaking the law right now. We are actively monitoring consumer complaints. We have lawyers ready to go into court, and we're prepared to deliver as much money as we can back to consumers, back to workers who have been ripped off, whatever our budget is.
Question, a policy question, Commissioner. Once upon a time, street vendor enforcement lived within DCWP. My understanding, it's been moved to sanitation, but you also are responsible for consumers and enforcing businesses. What are your thoughts in terms of, just hypothetically, what could be done better to sort of balance between brick and mortar stores, that their issue has always been, hey, I'm paying rent, I'm responsible for certain things, I don't feel I'm getting the same treatment as somebody who doesn't have the overhead I have, going back to small businesses feeling that they're being squeezed in some cases. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, it's an important issue, but I also think it's really important to not pit small businesses. And I'm not accusing you of this. I hear this from large companies all the time, pitting small businesses against each other. All small businesses are being squeezed. The fact is, in the last year of the Adams administration, I think just in the second quarter, we lost thousands of small businesses in New York City, and we don't even have the full picture from 2025. So we already have an exodus under Mayor Adams of small businesses. Even when the biggest corporations, the banks that build the giant towers in Midtown, enjoyed record profits and bonuses last year, the smallest businesses in the city really were facing very difficult times. And I think it's important to recognize the full suite of things that are squeezing small businesses. One of the things I have heard from a lot of smaller merchants, for example, is they are paying much higher prices for goods than big box stores. If you're a bodega, and I'm just going to use examples here, if you're a bodega, you might be paying a lot more for the same soda than a company like Target is paying, for example. So one of the things I've talked about, and one of our big priorities at the FTC, was that making sure small businesses don't face discriminatory prices just because they're small businesses. We also know that fees and fines can be a big challenge for small businesses. That's why Mayor Mondani signed a really important executive order directing every city agency, including mine, to make sure that we're not fining businesses, imposing fees on businesses, imposing regulations on businesses that squeeze them without actually making our communities safer, without actually lifting worker standards. So I think there's a lot we can do for small businesses. But to be clear, I think the biggest threat to small businesses aren't other small businesses. It's corruption, it's fines and fees, it's regulation, it's discriminatory pricing. And I think we really need an all hands on deck response to make sure all small businesses can thrive in the city, rather than just the biggest in the world.
Commissioner, what would you say, right? You've done plenty already in a very short time. I'm talking, the numbers are sort of exorbitant, but which I didn't even know, $500 million is a lot of money. I mean, $1 is too much, right, for someone that's living, basically, hand to mouth. But I want to just wrap this up soon, but I want you to tell me what's coming, right? What's down? What do folks have to, again, the average consumer that relies on the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection to sort of be, again, there to defend them from abuses and from malpractice. What do you say? What's coming down the pike in terms of the agency? What are things you say? Look, I came into this job, I want to tackle X, and I haven't gotten there just yet.
Yeah, well, we're about 6 weeks in. I was just looking at the calendar. We're moving quickly. I want to keep moving quickly. I want this momentum to continue. So I'll give you one example. What we're doing this month is a big focus on cracking down on junk fees. We banned junk fees in the hotel industry. We launched a citywide sweep of tax preparation companies to make sure they weren't imposing illegal fees. We launched a citywide sweep of employment agencies to make sure they weren't charging illegal fees. Nobody should be paying a fee to apply for a job. If you're out there looking for a job, looking for work, the last thing you need is junk fees. We're going to have more announcements like that in the weeks to come. cracking down on companies that are ripping off New Yorkers who are already struggling. But in terms of longer term, I really want every New Yorker to know that they have a champion in this department for them. And in terms of the issues that we're going to tackle, it's going to depend a lot on what we hear from the people of the city. We're about to launch rental ripoff hearings. We're going to hear firsthand from tenants about the kind of junk fees they might be facing. But I don't just want to hear from people at hearings. If people feel they're being ripped off in the grocery stores, we recently sent inspectors out to grocery stores. We're going to be sharing results on that very soon. We want to hear about it. Go to nyc.gov/DCWP. Tell us about it. If gig workers are being ripped off, either with fees or with illegal deactivations, we want to hear about it. If you're in a subscription you can't cancel, it's a big priority for us. We want to hear about it. So my goal is to not, there are certain initiatives that we're undertaking because we're seeing problems based on the complaints we have. But if you want to project it into the future, it's really going to depend on what we hear from New Yorkers. So I really encourage your listeners, if you feel like you're being ripped off, tell DCWP. We are the people's champion in New York City government, and we'll go after the companies ripping you off and make the city more affordable.
Last two questions. So far, best day on the job.
I loved being able to announce, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, returning millions of dollars to drivers at Hungry Panda, Fantuan, and Uber who had been underpaid. There's nothing like being able to look in the eye of a delivery worker and say, you've been underpaid. We're just going to put money in your bank account. You don't have to apply. You don't have to sign an affidavit. We're going to put money directly in your pocket. It was great to have the mayor uplift that announcement too. There's nothing better than being able to get money back directly in people's pockets.
Toughest day on the job so far.
I think the toughest day on the job, I had a roundtable with deliveristas at Workers' Justice Project. And to be clear, I had a wonderful time meeting with them, but hearing about some of the problems deliveristas have faced. I heard about one, later on, I heard about one deliverista who got injured on the job. And the app company lowered his rating. He was hit by a car, couldn't deliver his food. The app company lowered his rating. I heard from other deliveristas who felt that after they started to organize, they lost their jobs out of retaliation. I heard from one, he was a rideshare driver who woke up one day to log into the app, found he had been deactivated and could not look into the eyes of his wife and kids and tell them because he felt so much shame and had no idea why it had happened to him or how he would get back on his feet. So it is really as much progress as we're making, and I'm proud of the progress we're making. This is still a city where every day our workers and consumers are being exploited. And I think the toughest thing for me is to hear about that and to come back to the office and think about, all right, what are we going to do to solve this? What are we going to do to make lives better for working New Yorkers? But hearing those stories is really hard.
Commissioner, last two, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Difference between DC and New York City. You've lived in both places.
New York's better in every way. The people, the food, the diversity, not having, I won't even share my commentary on the current leadership of the federal government. To be clear, I loved DC. I loved federal service. I loved the Federal Trade Commission under Lena Khan. I think the agency did great work. I'm very proud of that. But I'm delighted to be here in New York City, and I'm delighted to be at what I think is the best department in city government, DCWP.
Commissioner, thanks again. Hopefully this won't be the last time. Anything you want to add that I didn't ask you?
No, it was great to be here. I hope to be back soon.
Thank you, Commissioner. All the best and continued success.